Your generation is the lean forward generation.
Anita tells the students in Mr. Jones's journalism class there is an extreme need for more Native American journalists.
We barely have 1% of our student population at the Cronkite School of Native American Descent. We need more.
After Anita's presentation, I pulled aside a few Native students to get their take on Native news coverage.
I think the Native American people are missing. They don't really talk about Native Americans on the news, like only if it's about drunk people or...
It's not in a positive attitude.
Yes,
it's
not
more of a negative. By negative, they don't say anything good. They could say something about football teams or other things, but they just say stuff like, oh, this person did a drunk driving accident and they were Native American. They enter that as Native American.
When you guys watch the news here in New Mexico, are there any Native reporters that you guys can identify with?
No.
Do you think if there were one or a couple that maybe you'd be more interested in going into this field?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
Why is that?
You don't just want to watch one person, one minority group on the news. You want to see different kinds, so it's more interest.
I think that's not something they've ever been exposed to. There's no role models in Native American in news, so they don't even consider it as an option.
I think role models is one of those things because when we see somebody else do it, then we know maybe we could do that.
Role models, someone you can look up to. Like Andy Harvey looked up to Mary Kim Titla.
I was up in South Dakota for a little over 2 years, and next thing you know, I'm down here. And the only reason why I came down here is because the news director here, Mark Casey, had been following my work. Because Mary Kim Titla, who was the only Native American reporter here, was one of my mentors I met at the Native Journalist Conference back in 2000. So I'd send her tapes when I was in South Dakota. She'd look at it, she'd help me. She'd let the news director look at it, her boss here at 12. He'd see my progress, and then she left, and he wanted to, continue to keep someone in that position, who brings Native stories.
Andy recently did a story about a Navajo family, a tragic story of a Marine killed in combat.
Among the snow-covered hills near Rock Point, Old Glory flies at half-staff for a fallen Marine.
So I used to say, why do you want to join the Marines? He says, Mom, that's going to be my goal. I want people to see me in that black uniform.
Eva Yazzie remembers her son, Lance Corporal Alejandro Yazzie, who, while growing up on the Navajo reservation, would pretend to be in the military, playing with his brothers, even building this foxhole, which remains there today.
I want people to know him by that name. He was my hero.
I'd love to focus on Native stories, but that's not the only stories I do. If I could, I'd do Native stories every day.
I feel very good about paving the way for others, and I'm very proud of the young Native people that I see who are now making those inroads and who call me a mentor, because I did try to be that to the young Native American college students in journalism.
Having a role model is important, but the cause goes deeper than that. Deborah Norris is the director of the Office of Indian Education at the Arizona Department of Education. She keeps track of academic trends involving Native students.
There are national reports where American Indian students across the country are self-reporting that they miss school at almost twice the rate of non-Indian students, and that can correlate into having academic problems in school.
Norris says dropout rates are high among Native students. In some schools, the rate is as high as 50%. Norris points out Native students also score the lowest on many standardized tests.
They're among the highest in the poverty rates as well. So those socioeconomic factors do figure into the data that we end up seeing in education.
While she says there are more Native students going to college than ever before, the minority group still has some catching up to do. Norris believes leaving the nest and seeking your fortune is a very Western idea. She says many young Native Americans know how important their community is, and leaving it would be foreign.
There are a whole host of other roles that a young person might play in their community, and none of them are less important, than going to a university. I mean, you might be born into a certain role by your clan, or just by the structure of society. So we know that there are some communities where it is very difficult for students to break those ties and go away for several years, or possibly in their minds forever.
Cultural taboos could also affect the choice of going into this field.
It can be a conflict of cultures. Like in Navajo, what I do is considered gossiping. When I told my relatives, they'd ask, what am I going to school for? And I tell them, they're like, oh, you're asaze, you're going to gossip. That's asaze Navajo, means gossip. So you can be the gossiper. So that's what they call it.
Andy Ramirez is the managing editor at an ABC Phoenix station. He's been in the business long enough to see the color change in the newsroom, from being predominantly white to more diverse.
So I think we're really on the cusp right now. I think people are starting to get how important it is. There's organizations like NABJ, NAHJ, National Association of Black Journalists, NAHJ, National Association of Hispanic Journalists, the Asian Journalists Association, the Gay and Lesbian Journalists Association. So there's all these different groups that are now coming together.
But Ramirez says representation of minorities is still a work in progress, and we're nowhere near where we need to be. Some say minorities will never fully be represented, like Rick Rodriguez.
Particularly now with the newspaper industry, with the television and radio industry in cutback mode because of financing, diversity has actually taken a backseat. So I actually think in the next 5 years we'll probably have taken a couple of steps back after we had only taken baby steps forward.
While that could be hard to hear, Anita keeps on trucking, traveling to schools and recruiting. We're going to Gallup High School right now to talk to more Native American high school students who are possibly looking into going into journalism as a career.
I made a lot of contact to a lot of high schools and looking for high schools with heavy Native American student population. I'm going through 9 high schools in 5 days, and it's quite a challenge.
The last class that she presented in was full of students, but this one, not so much. And these students didn't want to be here.
Well, you have a mix of both. It's one ear out the next, but then you have students that you make that eye contact and you can see, hey, there's something that maybe I've sparked a little bit more understanding about what a journalist does.